Welcome into WLOY, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOY.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle, Loyola's premier sports talk radio show, airing every Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. and every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. Welcome into another Monday edition of the show. We got a lot to talk about today, so let's just get into it. But first, we'll introduce ourselves as always. I am your host today, Jeffrey Bozzi, alongside my co-host, Jimmy Cody. Jimmy, how's your Monday going so far?
So far, so good. It is Super Bowl week, of course, so I'm excited for that. Great game should be this Sunday between the Chiefs and the Eagles. We also had some monumental news in the NBA as far as the Kyrie trade went. That finally cracked the surface. Obviously, he got traded to the Mavericks, so him and Luka teaming up now. We also have some NFL hires, some Greyhound basketball to talk about, so we'll get into all of that today.
Yeah, we have a lot to discuss. We have a lot to cover, but like you said, the monumental news coming out of the NBA, that is where we are going to start. So for those who do not know, Brooklyn Nets point guard Kyrie Irving, he was traded yesterday to the Dallas Mavericks in a blockbuster deal, and the Mavericks sent back to Brooklyn Dorian Finney-Smith, Spencer Dinwiddie, an unprotected first-round pick, and 2 second-round picks, and also Markieff Morris was added to the deal, so he is also going from Brooklyn to Dallas. So,
okay, all right, that's
a little bit of a wrinkle in there.
A little bit of a wrinkle. And when is that first round pick for? What year again?
So the first round pick is for 2029 and is unprotected, and then the 2 second round picks are for 2027 and 2029.
Interesting. Will be interesting to see where those picks end up in 6 years.
That's true. So
a lot could change.
Yeah, I guess, Jimmy, I'll ask you off that. I'll just keep it simple. What are your overall reactions to the trade? And I don't know, how do you see this playing out actually on the court? Because I think there should be a question raised about how Kyrie will fit with Luka, because they're both obviously ball dominant, but you could think maybe it could coexist. What do you think? What are your overall thoughts?
So my initial thoughts were about the trade itself, and I thought about the position that the Nets were currently in and what they were going to from, or from to two. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, when they lose a star player in the NBA, I feel like you never get back what you should for them, and I think this was another example of that. You never get what you should. Kyrie Irving's a good player. He's a great player. He's probably the 3rd or 4th best point guard in the NBA. You could maybe say 2nd, but point is, he's really, really, really good. And everybody knows that you're one step closer to a championship if you have Kyrie. So for the Mavericks, you know, when you're giving up Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith and Markieff Morris and some picks that aren't for quite a few years.
Oh, well, Morris is actually going to Dallas.
Okay, so never mind. Markieff Morris is going to Dallas.
But the other 2 are going to Brooklyn.
Okay, all right. So Dorian Finney-Smith is going to Brooklyn with Spencer Dinwiddie and the picks. That's not really a great trade for the Nets. They didn't get that much in return.
Yeah, I agree, because I feel like a lot of these deals these days, you're 100% right. When star players get traded, the other side of the deal is usually nowhere near close to what that player is. I mean, you look at the Rudy Gobert trade from the summer. That's the one I think of. It just reminded me of how much you could get for a player, but then you end up doing the deal and you really don't get much. But I think in Gobert's case, the Jazz got a lot for Gobert.
I thought that was just a terrible trade on Minnesota's fault or part, because they just gave up so much. That's their own fault. That was just a bad trade. But I'm talking about like these in-season spur of the moment trades. I mean, I feel like, do you ever feel like players are getting like what they should? I mean,
No.
Kristaps Porzingis, right? Like, let's look at that trade. That was in season. That was out of nowhere, just like this one was.
Right. I mean, I feel like that was
a
trade that wasn't really good for both sides.
Yeah. And we look at that Kyrie like deal where he went from Boston to from Cleveland, he went to Boston. I know that one was in the middle of the season, but again, that was kind of like an off-season one where they got a little bit more back in return. So it seems like in season, especially, you really never get what you're expected to get.
Well, it's funny too, because you brought up the Porzingis trade. After the Mavs traded Porzingis, they were actually better. They got to the conference finals. They had that nice little run in the playoffs, but yeah, I feel like Porzingis, when he went to the Wizards, didn't really do much, but he started having a better year this year. But I'll bring up another trade.
I was talking about the Knicks trade. That was
the Knicks trade. I was misunderstanding, because he was traded from the Mavs to the Wizards.
Yeah, he
So that was another trade that happened
from
in
the
season
Knicks,
as well.
Yeah, okay, so he was in two, but yeah, in
I
neither. of
mean,
those.
yeah, you're right though. The original trade that he was sent from New York to Dallas, that was kind of a weird trade at the time.
I'll go one further for you in terms of in-season deals. That really didn't live up to what we kind of expected. How about the Anthony Davis? Like they ended up getting a championship out of it, that trade. But I mean, look at what the Pelicans got in return. Was it really worth it?
Yeah. I don't think that was in season, but I see your point. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, they gave up AD, who's just one player, but we obviously know what he is, but they got back multiple picks, Lonzo Ball, and he was there for a year or two, and then they shipped him off to Chicago, and then the only really mainstay they've had is Brandon Ingram. He's worked out like pretty good. But
Basically Ingram for
Yeah.
Davis, but was that a fair trade? You would say?
no. Well, I guess in the Lakers sense, I guess they won it because they did get the title, like you said.
Oh, absolutely. The Lakers won that. I'm
Now,
saying
have they
if
been
you're the player, if you're
Good
the
since then?
team-
No, but yeah, it
if
worked
you're the
out.
team trading the star, you usually get screwed in the NBA.
Yeah.
I think.
I agree. You definitely don't get back as much as you gave up.
I mean, so many of you're never going to get like equal compensation.
Yeah.
Because what you get from one player, getting that from one player is not the same if you're getting that amount of talent and skill and quality in three players because it's just not the same.
Yeah. And then I know this isn't about the Kyrie trade yesterday, but speaking of the Nets, they made a huge in-season trade last year and the year before when they got James Harden from Houston. And then last year when they shipped him off to Philly for Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, and Andre Drummond.
Yeah, well,
So I mean, if any team knows about in-season trades like we're talking about, it's the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, that's another one too. It's like they got Simmons for Harden. I mean, obviously there's other players that were involved in there.
Right. Drummond's not there anymore.
Drummond-
Curry's still there and he's a pretty good player.
Yeah, that's one. But if you look at the star players, the big names, I mean, Simmons and Harden are not really on the same stratosphere right now. I think most would agree with that. Harden has certainly played better for the Sixers than Simmons has for the Nets. I mean, Simmons last year didn't even play.
Right. He
This is
sat out the
literally
whole
his
year
First year, yeah.
for mental health injuries and other stuff too.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is his first year essentially. And I would say the early returns are average at best, especially with his scoring. That's really where he's average at best. Obviously, we know about his defense. He's a good player there. And we know that
Great passer.
Great passer as well. But at the same time, we know that he is not the offensive player that James Harden is.
No, no doubt.
So that's another one. I'd say that worked out well for the Sixers.
Yeah,
They
so
got-
far
they
so
got rid of
good.
a guy that I felt like at the time couldn't get rid of at all, but in that situation, it ended up.
They
working
found
for-
a way.
Yeah, ended up working for the best of their abilities. As for this, though, I want to talk more about the Nets and what really this means for them. Where do they go here? Like, where do they go?
It's interesting because I'm not sure if you saw this from Bleacher Report, but they were trying to build around KD. Now that all this has happened, they said they're going to try to surround him with free agents in the summer. I'm not sure if they'll make another trade and try to get a second star back, if you will. But I don't know where they go because I could easily see Durant wanting out because we've seen him request a trade from the Nets. He requested a trade from them in the summer. And so clearly he wasn't happy about something. So I don't know. It might take a lot for him to stay. Now, if he wants to stay there for other reasons besides basketball, maybe off the court, business ventures or whatever, I mean, that could be one thing. But yeah, I don't know where they go because I feel like they might slip a little bit in the standings. I would still expect them to probably be in the playoff mix because they're still fourth in the East. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think they can win a title. I just think this is just awful for the Nets. You would have never seen this coming, that Kyrie would request a trade basically out of nowhere. And then 2 days later, he's gone. It's just a crazy turn of
It's
events.
just that things were going, or at least they seemed to be going so well.
Oh, they were going very well. Yeah,
We're just
100%.
waiting for Katie to come back and really get things going as far as the season.
I mean, they had a home court spot in the first round.
Yeah, and now for them, the focus kind of becomes, I would say, maintaining water from where they're at, right? Like or not maintaining water, maintaining the level that they're at, avoiding water, whatever you want to say. Some cliche term.
Treading water.
Yeah, treading water.
Yeah.
They're just trying to make their way through it.
Yeah. They want to stay in the top 6. They don't want to drop in the play-in.
Yeah.
That's probably their goal.
Yeah, that's absolutely their.
But I don't know where they go. I think it's a great question to bring up. I just don't know
They're not a championship team with one.
what they're
star.
going to do. I agree. And I guess some people would think that Simmons could be the second star, but he
But
can't
he's
score.
No, he's not though, because
He's not.
No, he's not.
And
Because
that's
it
the
wasn't
thing with
like-
Kyrie. Kyrie was clearly the other star.
it
And at
wasn't-
times Kyrie would be the like 1A and Katie's the 1B. They kind of would flip-flop based on how the game would go.
Here's the thing too. It's not like you're gonna get the same production out of Simmons that you ever would Kyrie. Like they're just not even comparable players. They don't do anything the same at all. And
No,
Ben
they
Simmons
don't.
won't even take a 3-pointer.
No. He's always looking to pass.
Yeah.
At least 9 times out of 10. But I was gonna flip it actually. So the Dallas side of things, obviously they were in the Western Conference Finals last year, and then this year they get Christian Wood, who is pretty solid big man. I mean, he's not too well known. I mean, when you compare him to Embiid or Jokic or whoever, but he's a pretty solid player, and he was kind of supposed to be the guy to fill the Jalen Brunson void that was lost when he signed with the Knicks. But they've kind of had this up and down year. But now they have Kyrie, and I know they kind of gave up a little bit of their depth, but I don't know. I think it's worth it for the Mavs to take a shot because they were really close last year and they really need a second star. And it came out a few weeks ago that they were really looking for one, and now they have one. So yeah, I think they can compete in the West. I think the question is, I don't know, do they have enough depth? Because their depth's kind of short. And Dinwiddie and Finney Smith were two guys who were regularly playing. Obviously, they were guys who could fill in, but yeah, I do think this gives them a shot. I just don't know. Would you take them over Denver, Memphis, the Clippers, the Pelicans, the Warriors? I don't know.
I don't know.
They definitely put themselves up there,
Yeah,
though.
I think they're in the conversation to potentially be in the championship at the end of the year, the finals, when it's all said and done, representing the Western Conference. But they're still going to have to go through the Western Conference. There's plenty of teams that can beat them. There's a lot of talent out there.
Yeah, I think the key for them is if they get in the top 6, I feel like they would be in a good spot there just because they don't want to go to the play-in.
Yeah, no, you don't want to go to the play-in in the West because that's just going to be even more to overcome. As for
Especially
the East,
potentially when the Warriors could be in there, maybe the Suns or the Lakers.
Yeah.
Not saying the Lakers are a big threat, but LeBron and AD, I don't know, any given night, LeBron and AD could be pretty dangerous.
Yeah, no, I understand completely what you're saying. It's just at the end of the day, we need to see the results of that, and I don't really know if the Lakers have the ability to make that happen, like a lot of the other teams in the Western Conference do. But I want to go over the like hypothetical trades that we heard from Shams Charania, who works for The Athletic.
Yeah, there were some interesting
there were
ones
some
in there.
interesting ones. So the first one was the Lakers, and what they offered up. So the Nets reportedly asked the Lakers for Russell Westbrook, Max Christie, Austin Reeves, 2 first-round picks, which were in 2027 and 2029, and then also a pick swap in a first round for Kyrie Irving. That's a lot.
It is.
It is a lot. That's a lot more than they got. And I'm also hearing too that Joe Tsai, the owner of the Nets, did not want Kyrie Irving to go to the Lakers.
I did hear that. Apparently he wouldn't trade him there because that is what Kyrie wanted. And he
Yeah.
was not going to give him what he wanted.
Well,
That's
if that was
very bold
if the
statement.
Lakers,
I also did see another thing. Sorry to interject, but
no, yeah, of course.
I did see something where the Lakers were kind of worried that Kyrie wouldn't stay after this year.
Yeah,
They kind of wanted him to be there long term, but I'm not sure if they would get that commitment from him right now.
that's what I was gonna say. This deal's a lot for a player that you don't know if he's gonna be resigning, number one. Number two, you don't really know LeBron's status. Like you have a feeling that he's not gonna, you don't know how much longer he really is gonna be there. Like you have a feeling he'll be there next year. You hope he'll be there the year after. But it's not like it's guaranteed.
Yeah, and I don't know
It's a team that could be
if the factor of Bronny coming into the NBA. I mean, I don't know if that's going to play a
That's
part.
so far away that it's like how that the Kyrie situation would have to be solved before that's even a thing.
Right. I think not having that initial commitment is probably the thing that was holding the Lakers up.
Probably. And that makes it very difficult for the Lakers because you can only go off of potential and you don't really know where Kyrie's mindset at. Another team that was interested was the Suns. The Suns have been very up and down. That's a good way to put it, I think.
100%.
Yeah. So they actually had a nice win over the Celtics a few nights ago.
They did.
So they offered the Nets Chris Paul, Jay Crowder, and picks I'm not really sure where those picks are, but I'm gonna assume that there might be a combination of first and seconds. But I mean, how would a Chris Paul, KD, Ben Simmons team look? Because I feel like Chris Paul and Ben Simmons are a little bit too similar on the offensive end of the floor. Chris Paul probably can obviously hit way more jump shots, but it's like, who do you want having the ball in your hand? I feel like the answer is Chris Paul.
I agree. He's more of a natural point guard. He's one of the best point guards ever. But I think
And
in
then
that kind of
Simmons-
lineup,
Simmons becomes nothing though. On
you
offense.
probably want Simmons to play center, honestly, because I know they have Nick Claxton. I just don't think you could play all four
That's a
out
good
there at
point.
the same time.
That's a good point, Jeff.
I
They could
think
that center
if Simmons was at center, I think that could potentially work.
it could make
Because
a great-
KD can play in the post, so he's not really on the outside, but he's not like too far inside. He's kind of in the middle of the court.
it could be a great lineup.
And Chris Paul and KD are both deadly from the mid range.
So I mean that's an interesting.
That's
one
a
in itself,
hypothetical.
just because of the star potential that it has, and that's also from Chris Haynes, who works for the New York Times.
Yeah.
And the last one is from Kevin O'Connor, who I think he works for the Ringer. So the Nets were also offered a deal by the Clippers. And that offer was Luke Kennard, Terrence Mann, a future first, 2 first-round pick swaps for Kyrie.
Yeah, that's an interesting deal because you don't know what the picks are, obviously. But if you look at the two
It's
players,
younger players.
Terrence Mann's a younger player. I mean, you could view him as a piece of a future team. I'm not sure if he's a number 2 option, but he could be a nice 6-man or maybe a number 3 or 4 if you give him maybe 2-3 years. And then Luke Kennard is a sniper from downtown. But I don't know how much he offers besides that.
Yeah, I mean, those are 2 kind of, I think, more bench pieces.
Yeah.
But if you ask me of those 3, what's the best deal? I think it's either the Suns or the Lakers deal. The Suns, I think, would make them the best team tomorrow. Just because of the players that they're offering. Like Crowder would have a huge effect.
Also, he hasn't really played much because he's been kind of unhappy.
That's right. They're
Phoenix.
looking to get rid of him.
Which is kind of surprising too.
Yes. But he would have a huge impact defensively. So he would certainly have a role on that team. Chris
No
Paul,
doubt.
With Kevin Durant, I'm sure they could make that work.
Mhm.
And with Simmons, there's a lot of potential there as kind of a big guy in that offense. So I would probably say I thought that's the best offer. But could you imagine if a Suns team was DeAndre Ayton and Kyrie Irving?
Oh boy.
Yeah, that would be with Devin Booker.
And
I mean,
Mikal Bridges.
that team would have been insane. I don't know.
That'd be an instant contender. I mean, I'm not saying they're not a contender right now because they have been a contender the last 2 years, but they've had kind of a down year this year.
Yeah, I don't know I really don't know if they got the best deal for this trade.
Yeah, I don't think they did
I
either.
don't think they got the best deal based on what those are saying.
Well, listen, it's interesting that Dinwiddie's going back to Brooklyn because he has played there before, so that'll be a second stint. But I did hear something where the Nets could flip him in another deal. And then you look at Finney Smith, he's a 3-and-D guy. He's a nice player. I mean, I'll give him his props, but he's not going to move the needle for you.
No, he definitely does not move them.
And then you don't know what the picks would be. I mean, I guess it's nice to have them, but they're also 4 to 6 years down the road. So you have no idea what the landscape of all that's going to look like. But I was going to bring up this point, and it's interesting. We were talking about the Suns. I do agree. I actually think the Suns have the best offer. I think that's what you said. I agree with you there.
Yes.
The Suns were actually thinking about going after KD. I'm not sure if you saw that.
Mhm.
And I think that's a little interesting wrinkle in all this because they said that if he was made available at all by the Nets before the deadline, which is this Thursday, that they would go after him. I mean, imagine KD with Devin Booker and Chris Paul and Mikal Bridges and Ayton or some kind of combination with that. I'm sure the Suns would have to give up probably one of those players, probably 2, but I mean, that would be an instant contender, I would think as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That would definitely be an instant contender. I mean, if we say that other team would be, there's no doubt that would be.
Right. And then the other thing I was going to bring up quickly, I'm not sure if you have any more thoughts on the whole trade here with Kyrie, but I'm looking at them on the court together, Luka and Kyrie, and they both need the ball. We know that Luka has the ball 24/7. I mean, to be fair, there's not really a lot of guys in the Mavs where you give them the ball and they get a bucket. Maybe Christian Wood's the only other guy. That's like only guy I could think of. But
Yeah,
Luka,
but the drop off there is massive from Kyrie Irving and Luka to Christian Wood. It's not even the
right.
same
And then
guys.
there's a more drop off between Christian Wood and I don't even know, Maxi Kleba or Reggie Bullock.
Yeah, whatever. Point is, It's
they're
not
like nice players, but I mean, they're not Luka Doncic.
no.
But I just don't know how it's gonna work because Kyrie can't really play in the post. Luka, I guess, can. I mean, he's a pretty tall point guard, but it's almost like they're gonna have to play side by side. It's almost like one of them's gonna bring the ball up on the left side and the other's on the right side of the court, and vice versa. It's gonna be interesting.
Honestly, I think people don't give Kyrie enough credit because he has always played with ball dominant players. He always has. And he really, I feel like everywhere he goes, he still puts up plenty of good numbers. He is still a very talented point guard. He can create his own shot in addition to creating other people's shot. Think about it. He's played with LeBron, who you could argue has the ball in his hands more than Luka does, right? And they're
Yeah.
still able to be successful with that.
Won a title.
And I'll tell you what, too, Kyrie's very underrated off the ball.
He is. He
He's
can
very
catch and shoot.
underrated off the ball. Like I think
He's a really good mover off the
yes,
ball.
I think he's gonna kind of take like a little bit less of like a point guard status on that team. I think he'll play a little bit more off the ball, and I think he'll be really good.
I think so too. And the other question is, and this has nothing to really do with Luka or Kyrie, because let's say they combine for, I don't know, on average, if they're combining for 55 a night, let's say, I'm just throwing out a hypothetical number, because Luka's around 30.
They're gonna have
30 something
they're
points.
Fine for 60 every night to have a chance.
Do you get enough help from the others? I think that's really going to be the question if they're going to want to win the West.
You probably need 60, 70 from them on a nightly basis to have a really good chance.
And I know it's a lot to ask for, but I think they can do it.
They probably
They're
can
both
do it.
electric
They're
scorers.
both great scorers, but I think the biggest concern for the Mavs is what's going to go on with this Kyrie situation. Like, is he going to be 100% in, or is he going to be like wishy-washy? We're not sure where he stands. Going into a contract year, I don't think that's what's going to happen. But it's also interesting to see, are they going to resign him? Like, is the deadline already passed?
I'm not sure.
I don't think it did. I think I mean, I assume they could still give him a contract extension. I'm pretty sure they still can. But at the same time, who's to say that he will, number one, accept one? Number two, what's to say he'll even want to come back? Like, he might just want to test free agency. That might be his whole goal all along. Is just be like, get to a point where I can get out of New York and also contest free agency and just pick where I want to go.
Yeah, I wonder what Mark Cuban is thinking up his sleeve. I wonder how that dynamic's going to work.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how Kyrie works with the Mavs, just because he doesn't feel very Mavericks to me. When you think about the players that they've had, they certainly never had a player like Kyrie.
No.
And I mean, honestly, when you think about it, the Mavericks, the stars that they have had kind of always been like foreign players. Steve Nash, Canada. Well, besides Jason Kidd, and Dirk Nowitzki from Germany.
And ironically, Jason Kidd is the Mavs head coach.
And then Lucas from Slovenia.
Yeah, they like the foreign flavor.
Yeah, this is pretty much the first American-born players besides Jason Kidd. But I would argue Kyrie might be a better player than Jason Kidd was. So, I would say I think he's going to take well to it because I think it's a new opportunity for him. That's what I hope.
And the other thing is too, just knowing how Kyrie is and how he operates, it's not like he's just going to come in and he's going to be the number one guy. Now he can be, but this is Luka's team at the end of the day. And it's not like he can just come in and say, oh, well, I want to do things this way, my way, blah, blah, blah. I mean, he's going to have to, I don't know, take part in whatever they're trying to do.
Yeah, they're going to have to switch their games a little bit, both of them, Luka and Kyrie, because that's the only way that's going to work because they're such similar players. However, based on what Kyrie's been able to do on the past, specifically when he played with LeBron, I think there's a reason that it can work.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. They debut on Wednesday night against the Clippers, ironically, another team that we mentioned who was in the running for Kyrie. They'll debut in LA on Wednesday night. So, yeah, I'm excited to watch, see how it goes.
Yeah, so let's move on from one set of basketball to another set of basketball. Let's talk about some Greyhound basketball, shall we?
Yeah, and I guess do we start with the game from Saturday? Because it was a disappointing end.
Mm-hmm.
The
very disappointing.
Loyola Greyhounds men's basketball team, they fell to Boston University by a final score of 68-67. And Jimmy, we were both there. I thought we were cruising, especially in the first half. We put up 46, which is a high amount of points. I mean, we only gave up 34, and we only gave up 34 in the second half, but the offense just wasn't there in the second half. And It's tough covering guys like Walter White, who had 18 points. He was a pretty good factor. But I don't know. What did you see from the Hounds? Just what went wrong from the first half to the second half?
The team that played in the first half is a team that can play with literally anybody in the Patriot League. The team that played in the second half is a team who will lose to everybody in the Patriot League. That's kind of the season that it's been. It's been like a tale of two teams. It's like when we put everything together, it looks good, and then when everything's not together, it looks horrible. That's exactly what Saturday was in two halves. The first thing I want to say was the second half offense, just buckets did not come by very easily. It was very tough to get buckets for us in the second half. And I felt like we had just a lot of mental errors, whether it was like, bad passes or it was dumb shots or it was rushing a shot that didn't need to be taken that early in the shot clock. I just felt like we were settling and making some bad decisions, especially when it came to our shot selection. And I felt like it really set us back, especially when you're cold. When you're cold, you got to look for better shots because you got to look for better options because the shots that are going to go in are the shots that are the best options. That's just the way basketball is. You need high percentage shots. And there were so many things. Like another example, like Golden had that awesome steal. And then unfortunately I don't know if he ends up doing something to his ankle, but it ends up being like a travel. I mean, had he gotten that bucket, I felt like, off the steal was a great defensive play by him. I thought had he just went up, gotten a layup, and had everything been okay and him not get injured and whatnot, I thought it could have been a play that kind of switched it for us and we could have really gotten rolling.
Yeah, it's unfortunate he went down with the injury on that play, but I agree with everything you said. I felt like in the first half we were really moving the ball well, and I think, like you said, getting those open shots, those wide open shots, and we were hitting them. I mean, that's the recipe. That's what you got to do. And then unfortunately, those shots weren't falling in the second half. And then I thought our shot selection too got a little worse in the second half. I thought we were kind of settling for these transition 3-pointers, and I guess we have some guys who are capable of making them, but those are not great shots to take, especially early in the shot clock. You don't want to take them with 24 on the shot clock. You'd rather move it around, try to get inside and use the 30 seconds. I don't know. I just felt like the team just went really, really cold. And I don't know, once BU took over in the middle part of that second half, it's almost like we were trying to get it back and we just never did.
It felt like it just was quicksand because of the way that BU came out. They came out with so much more energy than it felt like we did in the second half. And it wasn't just that. What was another thing that we didn't really talk about? Free throws again.
Right.
6 for 11. I mean, if we make 2 of those, we win the game.
I know. I agree with you there. And I would take it a step farther. I would try to get to the line even more.
Yeah.
Because BU only went 6 for 8. I mean, I know that's a better percentage than 6 for 11, but we actually got to the stripe more than they did.
Yeah, we got to the stripe more than they did, and we made the same amount of shots.
I mean, that's how you get quote unquote free points.
Exactly. And I thought too, like early on, I thought we were dominating the boards. That kind of went away as the game progressed. Because we only ended up having like a 2-board advantage when it was all said and done.
Yeah. And Golden had a good day on the boards.
Yeah, and he was absolutely pummeling them
before he went out with the injury.
Yeah, so that was really tough. As for the shooting percentages in themselves, BU was a little bit higher. They only made 1 more shot than us, but they took less. So I don't know. I don't really know what to say. Very similar game. It was just the energy switch in the second half. And if it was a few key plays that ended up being the difference. It was really the turnovers. I mean, it was the turnover battle was really only a one thing difference. You only had 1 more turnover. So despite them playing so bad in the second half, we kind of gave the game right back to them. And that stinks to say.
I know it's a shame when you have such a control and a firm grasp on the game. And then, I don't know, you have 1 or 2 bad plays and you think it's no big deal and you're going to be fine. And then those 1 or 2 bad plays turn into 4 or 5 bad plays. And I feel like it just keeps getting piled on. And that was a shame to watch. But the other thing too, I feel like a lot of times when the Hounds are playing well, they kind of have the guards just kind of carry them. And the guards were okay, but they weren't great. I just know that we know that Kenny and Dion can shoot better than they did. We know they can, but they just had an off day. And I think Jalen could have taken more shots. I think he only had 11 points, but he was 4 for 8. So maybe he takes a few more shots. I feel like the guards kind of are the impetus to the offense. If their shots are falling, I feel like it makes everyone else's job a little easier.
Certainly agree with that, Jeffrey. I certainly agree with that for sure. And we have 2 games this week. We have a game on Wednesday against Army, West Point, and that one's away. That's 6 o'clock on Wednesday. And then we play a game Saturday night at Lehigh.
Oh boy,
Yeah,
it's a tough week.
yeah, that is a tough week. 2 away games. I don't know. You just gotta kind of just put your head down and just focus on one game at a time. That's really, I think, the story of it, right?
Yeah, no doubt. You gotta build somewhat of confidence going into the Patriot League tournament.
Yeah. And these are 2 teams that are obviously ahead of us. Lehigh is 9-3. They're second in the conference.
Right.
And Army is 7-5. They're in a tie for third with American.
Yep. And then I would even go down the road a little farther. You still have a game against Lafayette and another game against Holy Cross. And those are teams that are ahead of you in the standings, but you're looking at the records and you're only a game or 2 behind each of them. So there's some opportunity there.
Yeah.
If you can just get some confidence, get a win or 2. I mean, I don't know. It's all it takes. We talk about this every year. I mean, you say it more than anyone. Momentum.
Yeah, momentum's huge.
Just got to find it. And then hopefully you ride it long enough where it can do some great success.
Yeah, hey, we saw it in that game. We saw the momentum that BU came out with in the second half and was able to sustain on that run that they opened up in the second half. That ended up being the difference in the game. So yeah, can't underestimate momentum enough. I think we're going to take a quick break and then come back after this. What do you think?
Yeah, we have some Super Bowl points to touch on. Not too much. We don't want to give away too much information because we'll save that for Friday. But there's other NFL news that we'll get into as well. So stick with us. We'll be right back after this break. You're listening to After the Whistle on WLOY Loyola Radio. Welcome back to WLOY Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOY.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle, Loyola's premier sports talk radio show, airing every Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. and every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. Once again, we're Jeffrey Bozzi and Jimmy Cody, and now we're going to dive into the NFL, and there's a lot going on with some off-season storylines. We'll get into those in a little bit, but there is a big game on Sunday, the Super Bowl 57, I believe. Quote me if I'm wrong, Jimmy, but that'll be taking place Sunday night in Arizona at 6:30 kickoff on Fox. And we have the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. And yeah, this is probably just the first week where, I don't know, the Super Bowl hubbub and the media, it all starts to ramp up this week. Last week was just kind of quiet because, I don't know, we had some time to digest the matchup. And now I feel like this is where stuff's going to ramp up. So
Silliness.
Yeah.
Week. That's what I call it. It's just always just silliness. I mean, I honestly agree with whoever the Eagles player was, or I think it was an Eagles player, who said, it was a couple of years ago, was saying how it's such a waste of time to do this whole week where they go there. Like, why don't you prepare like it's a normal week? I never understood that. There's just no need. It does not make it a better game by any means. Like, just let the players do their normal schedule. Like, that should be the priority. I don't know. It's just silly to me. But yeah, we're going to have the media day coming up. I'm sure some player will make a fool of themselves or somebody will do something silly. And then we'll also have the NFL honors this week as well. So
that's right.
We'll have the MVP announced. I would assume that's probably going to be Patrick Mahomes. That's probably what we're thinking. As for comeback player of the year, I don't know, there's a couple of guys could be, honestly. There's a lot of options for that. Rookie of the year, we'll hear about defensive player of the year, defensive rookie of the year, offensive player of the year, offensive rookie of the year,
coach of the year too.
Coach of the year. We'll hear about all of that. Everyone seems to think those are pretty soft, but they're pretty open. I mean, when you think about like coach of the year, there's a lot of great options. You can go with Kyle Shanahan working with Brock Purdy. You can go with Pete Carroll after trading Russell Wilson and still having a great season. Doug Peterson, the first overall pick to the second round of the playoffs with the Jaguars. And then you also have the Giants, who Brian Daboll took them to the second round as well. So a lot of great options there. And then you also got the Eagles. But I want to ask you really quickly if you saw the Julian Love comment about Nick Sirianni.
I did.
Yeah, so what was said about Nick Sirianni by Julian Love was essentially him as a coach basically was called into question because the Eagles have such a talented roster. And for myself, I have to say this. I cannot say how stupid that is of a take coaching is so important in the NFL. I would say it's more important in the NFL than it is any other sport. Basketball, I mean, do you think Ham is telling LeBron what to do? Probably not. But I know that Sean Payton is going to be telling Russell Wilson what to do. I know Andy Reid is telling Patrick Mahomes what to do. Like, I just know that's the way that it is. And I just think that that's just this ridiculous take because coaching, they're literally the ones calling the plays. They have more directive, I think, in football as a coach than there is in any other sport. And I just think for Julian Love to say that it's ridiculous. Look at his own team. Look at the difference in someone like Daniel Jones when he had Brian Daboll as the coach this year, as opposed to Pat Shurmur and all the other disastrous coaches, including Joe Judge and Jason Garrett, who was the OC at one point. I mean, look at that coaching difference. So for Julian Love, I would strongly disagree with that notion. That's just all I want to say. Jeff, the floor is now yours for that take.
Well, the short answer is yes, I agree with you. I disagree with what Jordan Love said, but
Julian Love?
Julian Love.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I just don't know where he was coming from. Now, listen, I get it.
Jealousy?
It's probably part of it, but
Probably.
no, you're 100% right. I feel like in the NFL, especially, you need coaches that are going to be there to develop players. I mean, we talk about it a lot with
Oh, yeah.
developing QBs that are taken high. It takes a year or two before they kind of fit into the league. But I know that the Eagles have like a pretty good roster, but I don't know. You need coaches to prep them for certain situations. You need them to kind of be there for support. I don't know. I just felt like it was kind of a comment that came out of nowhere. I mean, he just goes out on Twitter or whatever it was. I don't even
It was
know.
on Good Morning Football.
I was on Good Morning Football. I just assumed it was a tweet.
No, it was on Good Morning Football, which I think is worse. I mean, also another thing, from the perspective of Julian Love for him to consider, look at it like this. The GMs, Howie Roseman for the Eagles, is like the guy who gets all the parts and all the tools to build something. And then Sirianni and Steichen and Jonathan Gannon are the guys who have to put all the work together and get everyone to come together to make it all happen. Howie can only give them the pieces. And there's plenty of talented teams who don't win the Super Bowl. The Bills didn't have the pieces come together. I don't think that makes Sean McDermott a bad coach. I still think he's a good coach. But to discredit Nick Sirianni because the Eagles are successful, I disagree with that point. That's really just the thing that annoyed me.
Yeah, and what you said before that, the fact that his own team had a new coach and you saw what Daboll did. I mean,
Yeah.
He did wonders for that team.
Absolutely.
They went from basically being a laughing stock team to, okay, now they're very, very respectable.
Yeah, very, very respectable to say the least. All right, so we have some other NFL news to hit on. Jeff, let's hear your thoughts. Tom Brady to Fox in 2024.
Yeah, so I'm curious where he's going to fit in because you would think that maybe he would get the top analyst role.
That was what was agreed on
So
for his 10-year, 300.
I wonder how Greg Olsen feels about that.
This is big for Greg Olsen. So I was thinking about that too. Maybe you think they go 3-man? Any chance they go a 3-man booth?
It's possible.
Just because they're paying Brady so much, or maybe if they realize Greg Olsen is just that good.
I think they would
They
do it
keep
if
him.
the three of them agreed to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that sounds so simple to say, but if all three are on board, they would probably do it. But I like how Brady's not doing it in 2023 and he's doing it in 2024. He can enjoy his time off. He should get a lot of time off and do whatever he wants. But I think a big thing for Greg Olsen, and I'm not saying that Brady's gonna replace Olsen, but I feel like that could
No,
be
that's the
an
plan.
assumption.
That's
So is that
what the plan?
so?
was.
Did they say that? Fox said that?
Is the plan? Greg Olsen is the number one guy.
So I didn't really read into it too much just because I
No, this has been
was kinda
this has been the plan for a while.
looking at it, but yeah,
They
it's
did not-
interesting.
I think Greg Olsen became good this year, but I don't think Fox was ever that high on him.
Right. I do think he's had a way better year this year than last year.
Yes.
And I think
He was
this
good.
Super Bowl is going to be huge for him because this is obviously the biggest spotlight that he's ever going to be in as a commentator. So
him and Kevin Burkhardt.
this is his chance,
This
right?
is both their first Super Bowl. They both just got jumped up this year after Joe Buck and Aikman left,
Right.
which was kind of surprised, I think, by a lot of people. I don't think a lot of people expected Joe Buck to just leave because he's calling, think about it. It wasn't just football. He was also calling MLB, like specifically the World Series, and he also did the golf. for
Right.
Fox too.
And then we saw Troy Aikman not too much longer after join Joe Bucket, ESPN, and now they're
Yeah.
on Monday Night Football. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. And the other thing for Burkhardt, you talk about him with the Super Bowl, and he's never covered one. We know that, but he's covered the World Series on TV, not as a commentator, but
Host.
as a host for Fox's pre and post game shows for the World Series games. And that's obviously a huge stage. That's baseball's biggest stage. So yeah, he has experience doing really, really big sporting events and games. So I think he's going to be okay. And I do think Olsen's going to be fine. I think they're a pretty good duo. They kind of give a different outlook on the game, I think, than Nance and Romo would.
Definitely.
So I think as far as Brady goes and how he factors in, I think for Burkhardt and Olsen, if they do really well in the Super Bowl, I think that would really show Fox that, hey, they could be here to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I thought Greg Olson did a good job in the NFC Championship explaining the Eagles offense. I was very impressed with him. Actually, I thought he was better than Tony Romo.
I agree.
Tony Romo's taking some steps back, and I don't know if you saw this, but apparently CBS had a whole little intervention with Romo, although, of course, they're denying it, but I doubt that. If there's smoke, there's fire. Like, I would not be surprised. And I think it's clear amongst football fans, like, Tony Romo is not what he was a couple of years ago. I think he's clearly lost the step because he's not in the game anymore. And he's not as aware of the concepts that defenses are doing like he was when he first came out of the league. Probably needs to do a little bit more preparing.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it too. And I think we were so infatuated with the fact that he would just call out every play before it would happen, and then it would happen. And we were thinking, oh, how does this guy know so much? How does he know that they're going to do this and that, blah, blah, blah. And then he would say, oh, there's going to be a penalty on this guy, or there's going to be defensive holding on this guy, or a false start on this guy. And I don't know. We liked it early on. I just think now, I don't know, when he's wrong, and it's kind of a bad look. And I don't know. I feel like him trying to guess what plays come, because I'm just saying this because this is what he's really known for, but I feel like it kind of takes some joy out of the viewers, because I don't know if you're a casual NFL fan or just a casual fan watching football just because it's on the TV, you flip it on, whatever. I don't know. You kind of want to guess what's going on. You kind of want to learn about it, at least for some people. But I feel like maybe he takes the joy a little bit away from that by saying, oh, they're going to have two guys out on the right and they're going to bootleg or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's definitely like something that's going to be a scenario to watch going forward. I want to ask you another thing though, specifically about Olsen and Burkhardt. I don't know if you know this, but Burkhardt is an Eagles fan. He grew up an Eagles fan.
Oh, I did not know.
Yeah, so he's going to be calling his own team the Super Bowl. So that's interesting. But number two, if Olsen is bad, I feel like there's going to be this pressure of like he just knows he's going to get replaced by Brady. So I feel like you're definitely right on that standpoint, but I feel like it's going to add even more pressure to the situation.
Well, so I'll touch on both of those. First with Burkhardt. I did not know that actually, that he was an Eagles fan. And it's funny because when the Eagles played the Patriots in Super Bowl 52, Chris Collinsworth, who was calling that game with Al Michaels for NBC, he had a lot of slander come his way because he was viewed by a lot of Eagle fans as being very biased toward the Patriots. So now it's kind of funny that it's assumed that it might be the opposite. I'm not saying that Burkhardt's going to be like, oh, another first down by Kansas City, like that kind of tone. He's not going to do that. Obviously, he needs to stay very, very, very neutral. But I don't know. It's kind of funny that kind of worked both ways. But
kind of
on the Olsen side, yeah, I don't know. He's got a lot of pressure, but we'll see.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about some of the actual news involving players and coaches who are in the NFL. So the first thing I want to ask you, there's reports coming out that Jalen Hurts contract extension talks are on the way. And right now the number from Jeremy Fowler is about 50 million a year. That's a lot.
Sheesh.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot. And it's not, the Eagles are kind of in a bad spot because it's not just Jalen Hurts who needs to be paid this offseason. It's Tua, it's Justin Herbert, it's Joe Burrow, it's Lamar.
Not to mention guys who were on their own team.
Yeah.
Non-quarterbacks.
Okay, yeah, that's another good point as well. But that's 4 quarterbacks who are also going to be getting deals done. The Eagles have to get the deal done first, so they're not spending extra money.
100%. You don't want the Chargers going out and breaking the bank for Herbert, and then you're thinking, oh, I think Jalen Hurts deserves more than Herbert, and then you have to pay him.
Well, the problem for the Chargers is they have to make some cuts. I saw something that apparently Keenan Allen is a possible cut victim this year.
Wow.
Yeah, because apparently the way his contract is it's just too much money. I mean, maybe they could always cut him and him come back on a different contract, or they could always restructure, which I think is much more likely. But it's possible he could be getting cut, according to Don Kleiman on Twitter, who reports about the NFL. But I don't know. We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, I wonder how many years the Eagles would try to offer Hurts.
Well,
If it is
I
50
don't
million a
think
year,
you wanna go. I think
going
if
off of
you're
that.
the quarterback, you want to go past 4 or 5, right? Because you want to make a big enough commitment that it's one that you can show over that course of time that you're worthy, but also you don't want it to be too short where you're missing out on money that you could have had.
Right, you want to get the bag, as
But
they
you
say.
also, if the contracts start going up again, you want to be able to get another one so that you can be paid even more.
Also, I don't know, maybe from the team standpoint, maybe you go with the first 2 or 3 years and you are kind of close to winning a Super Bowl, you don't really get it done. Maybe there's an opt-out after the 3rd or 4th year, and maybe you decide to just say, hey, I'm out. I want to go somewhere else.
Yeah. And it's also interesting with these because we see so many times where coordinators leave, assistant coaches leave, and then it's just not the same. Like I always just think about Carson Wentz when Frank Reich left. It was just never the same after that.
No,
And
100%.
it wasn't the same when he even went to Indianapolis with Reich. It wasn't the same players, obviously, but it just would made such a difference. And that's another sign right there. Coaching. Assistant coaches are very important. It is important who your offensive line coach is. I mean, the Eagles have a phenomenal offensive line coach slash run game coordinator, and he has gotten offers, like some huge offers, like to play or to be the coach of college teams, to be other teams' OCs, and he just declines. They actually just signed him to a contract again, so it's a proof that these teams that are run well, they care about assistant coaches. And Julian Love, there's definitely an impact that coaching has.
Yeah, there's a lot to juggle from assistant coaches to QB coaches to position coaches on the offense and the defense. But then there's also free agents. I feel like the cost of being good sometimes is that after you get so far in the playoffs, you got to end up paying these people, and you kind of have to
can't pay
pick
everyone.
and choose. And I'm just thinking of the Eagles here, just because that's the team that I follow and that's who I root for. After the Super Bowl, whether they win it or lose it, they're gonna have to make a decision. Number one, how much money do they give Hurts, or do they wait a year and then they give him the money, or do you
Miles Sanders, what's going to happen with him?
you give Sanders a contract? And we
I
know
think
the history with running backs,
I think
so
Sanders
we'll see.
is gone, Jeff. I just don't see a way with that offensive line it makes any sense to pay a running back. The offensive line is so good. You get almost the same results with Gainwell that you do with Scott or with Sanders. Obviously, I know Boston Scott's the third running back, but he's shown some flashes as well. Maybe you don't make Gainwell the one, but maybe you draft a running back that you do by committee.
Right, or you
That's
sign a
cheaper
free
option.
agent. Yeah.
Yeah, but you could get someone cheaper in the draft.
Right, you save so much money and you're basically not losing too much.
Yeah.
And then there's other guys such as James Bradbury, who is the CB2 this
Mhm.
year. And I don't know, you would think that he could maybe want to stay. Maybe he likes it here and he want to stay, but you also could see him walking because you think maybe he would want
He just had his best
cornerback one money.
He just had his best year. He was second team all pro. The Eagles are gonna have to pay him a lot.
Right. And you still have Darius Slay on the other side, who's the number one corner.
Yeah.
There's a lot to juggle with all these teams. And the Chiefs, I'm sure, will probably have similar issues.
And then Edwards, he may not say, right?
Right, yeah, I don't know about that.
Could be potentially
He could be a plug-in guy.
yeah, a guy next year.
They're kind of grooming him this year. Yeah, there's a lot to figure out.
Yeah, but I'll tell you one thing that the Eagles have going their way is that they have their best pass rusher on a very small contract. So that helps.
That does.
Yes. So there's one more thing I wanted to just highlight really quickly here before we finish up. We have Ajiro Avira, who was the Broncos defensive coordinator, is going to take the job in Carolina. That'll be interesting. Carolina completely rebuilding their staff, so he's going to team up with Frank Reich. Interesting to see where the Panthers go the rest of the way, because they were 7-10 last year after that just horrific start in the Matt Rule disaster. But I mean, I feel like the first question for them is quarterback.
Yeah, you got to figure that out.
Yeah, you got to figure out what's going on at quarterback in Carolina before you can go anywhere else. And then also the last thing I want to close on, Sean Payton had his introductory press conference today, and he was asked if there was going to be any personal coaches allowed in the team building. And when it was a Denver radio host who asked him that, and he had no clue what was being asked of him. And he was like, specifically, Russell had a coach, a personal coach, who apparently was there every day. Sean Payton did not like that, said that was quote unquote foreign to him, and there will be none of that with him as the head coach. So I like that as a
He's putting his foot down. I like it.
I like that because they're, from what the rumors out there is that Hackett and Russ, their offense was not exactly eye to eye on what they wanted. And I don't care who was making decisions, whoever it is, they're just horrible. But it goes on both of them because they're both the big names in the scenario. But I like that Sean Payton is just coming in, controlling the narrative right away. That's the difference that you get when you hire a Sean Payton and a Nathaniel Hackett. Hackett's a joke. Sean Payton, he comes in and immediately commands the room, and people respect him.
Yeah, and I think the difference with Hackett and Peyton too is, I don't know, Peyton, he likes to have fun too, but he also cares a lot. Like you said, he comes in right away on the first day. Right, and I think it's a perfect example of what we just talked about. And the first day he comes in, he doesn't want any personal coaches, trainers, whoever to be around. And I think that's just a sign of him kind of asserting his authority. But
Yeah.
I guess my other thing I would say about the Aviro loss is, who do you think the Broncos are going to go after for a DC? Because the thing is, Aviro did great things with the D last year. I feel like, especially because they had injuries all over the roster. So the fact that they kept him, I think, what was it, like a top 5, top 10 scoring defense? I mean, might have been the best scoring defense for a little bit last season. I mean, they were right there with these other defenses.
Yeah, I mean, we all know the record if they could score 18 points on offense.
Yeah.
So that says enough about where the defense was last year. But one of the persons that they are interviewing and it's scheduled is Brian Flores.
Ooh.
So we'll see how that goes. I don't think any of the other candidates have been announced yet, but we know that Sean Payton is doing Zoom interview with Brian Flores later this week. I think it's Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay. I mean, would you like him?
Brian Flores? I think Brian Flores did a really good job with the Miami defense. I'll tell you what, they got a lot worse after he left.
Right. And I feel like even when he was there and they had a pretty good defense, I feel like they didn't have too much star power.
No, they really didn't. They actually had a pretty solid D line, especially with Christian Wilkins. Like, he did a good job with him.
Right.
And he also did a pretty sneaky, decent job with the defensive backs that they have.
Right. And then if he goes to a place like Denver, I mean, you got Patrick Surtain there.
Yeah.
You know what he is.
My concern, though, is improving at linebacker. I think that's really, like, you got to improve the roster there a little bit. With all due respect, Singleton was on a minimum contract. He had a good enough year, but, he's not a long-term answer. You got to
No.
improve that.
Yeah,
That's
he's
my
just a
opinion.
plug-and-play guy for now.
Yep, exactly. And they also gotta right the ship on their D line a little bit because their best player, Draymond Jones, he's up for a contract and his franchise tag is just under 20 million for a D lineman. That's a lot, and he's a D tackle. So he's our by far best pass rusher on the D line, but I don't know. We're gonna have to figure that out. I don't think he's gonna be getting saved, so I think he's gonna be out.
Yeah, there's a lot to figure out there, but I think the Broncos are off to a good start with this offseason.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right, is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, I don't think so.
All right, well, thank you as always for all of our listeners to tune in today. We'll be back on Friday. We'll be definitely previewing the Super Bowl, and we'll get into some other stuff as well. So thank you as always for listening, and we will be back on Friday.